He raised twin girls as his own, found on his doorstep during a stormy night. For years, he poured his heart into giving them the love they deserved. But then, a mysterious necklace hidden away reveals a shocking connection to a past he thought he left behind. Who left them on his doorstep? And why does this secret threaten to unravel the family he's built? As the truth comes closer to the surface, one question remains. Can love withstand the weight of a hidden past? Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. Thunder crackled across the night sky as Daniel Harper's calloused hands moved methodically over the smooth wood of the rocking chair he was crafting. The workshop, illuminated only by a single overhead lamp and occasional flashes of lightning, felt both familiar and lonely. Sawdust covered his worn jeans, and the scent of fresh-cut pine filled the air as he worked, finding comfort in the routine of his craft. A particularly bright flash of lightning drew his eyes to the small, framed photograph perched on his workbench. Emily's smile, frozen in time, seemed to glow in the brief illumination. His late wife's kind eyes and gentle expression made his heart ache, even after all these years. Daniel ran his thumb across the frame, leaving a clean streak in the thin layer of sawdust. "I miss you, Em," he whispered, his voice barely audible above the storm's fury. The sudden, urgent knocking at his door made him jump, nearly dropping his sandpaper. Who could be out in weather like this? The knocking came again, more insistent this time. Daniel hurried through his workshop and into the house, switching on lights as he went. When he reached the front door and pulled it open, the howling wind nearly yanked it from his grip. At first, he saw nothing but sheets of rain. Then his eyes dropped to the porch. There, protected somewhat by the overhang, sat a woven basket. Inside, two tiny faces peered up at him, their cries joining the storm's chaos. Daniel's heart stopped for a moment, then began racing. Twin baby girls, swaddled together in soft pink blankets, their faces red from crying. "Dear Lord," he breathed, quickly bringing the basket inside and closing the door against the storm. The baby's cries softened slightly in the warmth of his home, their tiny fingers reaching up toward him. As Daniel carefully lifted one of the infants, he noticed something glinting in the basket. Tucked beside where the baby had been lay a delicate necklace, its silver chain and intricate pendant catching the light. He gently placed the baby back with her sister, his hands shaking slightly as he picked up the necklace. No note, no explanation, just two precious lives left on his doorstep with this single piece of jewelry. Daniel carried the basket into his living room, where a fire still burned low in the hearth. He placed it on the coffee table and sat heavily in his armchair, his mind whirling with questions and decisions. The proper thing would be to call the authorities immediately. But as he reached for his phone, one of the babies made a soft, cooing sound, and he found himself pausing. The twins had settled now, their tiny hands clasped together as they drifted to sleep in their basket. Daniel watched them, mesmerized by their peaceful faces, so trusting and innocent. Memories flooded back, dreams he and Emily had shared of starting a family, hopes that had died with her. Now, somehow, two beautiful baby girls had literally been delivered to his doorstep. Mayor Thompson would have to be informed, of course. The town was small enough that trying to hide something like this would be impossible. But perhaps there was another way, besides immediately involving child services. Daniel picked up the necklace again, studying it under the warm glow of his table lamp. Something about it tugged at his memory. The way the silver was worked into delicate swirls, the unique pattern of the pendant. It reminded him of something he'd seen before long ago. An image flashed in his mind. His sister Eliza, barely a teenager, wearing a similar necklace at their mother's birthday dinner. The memory was so clear. Eliza proudly showing off the piece of jewelry, their mother's rare smile of approval. But that had been years ago, before everything fell apart, before Eliza left. Daniel shook his head, pushing the thoughts away. It had to be a coincidence. Right now, these babies needed him. He carefully placed the necklace in the drawer of his side table, his decision made. Whatever mysteries surrounded their arrival, these little girls deserved a loving home, and he would give them one. Days turned into weeks. Spring had painted Willow Ridge in cheerful colors, with cherry blossoms dotting the town square and morning sunlight warming the cobblestones. Daniel Harper pushed the double stroller along the sidewalk, smiling down at Sophia and Lila as they cooed and reached for passing butterflies. The past 5 months had transformed his quiet life into one filled with midnight feedings, diaper changes, and more joy than he'd thought possible. "Daniel Harper, is that really you with babies?" Alice Mitchell's voice carried across the square. The plump woman with her ever-present floral apron hurried over, her gray curls bouncing with each step. "I simply can't believe my eyes." Daniel's shoulders tensed slightly, but he maintained his friendly demeanor. "Good morning, Alice. Yes, these are my girls, Sophia and Lila." Alice peered into the stroller, her eyes widening. "My word, they're absolutely precious. But I had no idea you were… when did you…" She let the questions hang in the air. Around them, other townspeople slowed their pace, clearly interested in the exchange. Mrs. Peterson paused while watering the flowers outside her shop, and Mr. Jenkins actually stopped sweeping his storefront to listen. "They came into my life rather suddenly," Daniel said carefully, adjusting Lila's blanket. "Sometimes the best blessings are unexpected ones." Alice tilted her head, studying the twins' faces. "You know, there's something so familiar about them. Something in their eyes. I just can't put my finger on it." Daniel's heart skipped a beat, but he kept his expression neutral. "Babies often remind us of someone we know," he replied diplomatically. "They're developing their own little personalities every day." The whispers around them grew more noticeable. "Just appeared one day. No mother in sight. Very mysterious." Later that afternoon, Daniel found himself in his dusty attic, searching through boxes of his mother's belongings for any baby items he might be able to use. The twins were napping downstairs, the baby monitor clipped to his belt, offering reassuring sounds of their peaceful breathing. As he moved aside an old quilt, a leather-bound photo album slipped free. It fell open to a page that made Daniel's breath catch in his throat. There was Eliza, his younger sister, on her 16th birthday. Around her neck hung a delicate silver necklace, identical to the one he'd found with the twins. Daniel sank onto an old trunk, the photograph trembling in his hands. The memory of their last fight came rushing back with painful clarity. Eliza, barely 20, screaming that she couldn't live under their mother's controlling thumb anymore. Him, telling her she was being selfish, abandoning her family responsibilities. The sound of the door slamming as she walked out of their lives. That evening, as Daniel sat in his kitchen feeding the twins their bottles, his mind wouldn't stop racing. Could Eliza be connected to this? The necklace? The timing? But why would she leave her own children on his doorstep? Why not come to him directly? Sophia made a happy gurgling sound as she finished her bottle, drawing Daniel's attention back to the present. He gazed at her tiny face, then at Lila's, his heart swelling with love. Whatever the truth might be, pursuing it could only bring chaos into their peaceful lives. With gentle determination, Daniel pushed the questions aside. He carefully burped each baby, focusing on their immediate needs rather than the mysteries of their past. The photograph and necklace could stay hidden away, along with his suspicions. These precious girls needed stability and love, not complications from the past. The warm spring sunshine filtered through the workshop windows, casting golden rays across Daniel Harper's workbench. 5 years had passed since that stormy night, transforming his quiet life into one filled with giggles, scraped knees, and countless bedtime stories. Now, on this peaceful Saturday morning, the sound of small feet padding across sawdust-covered floors filled the space. "Daddy, can I sand this piece?" Sophia asked, her bright eyes sparkling with enthusiasm. She held up a small wooden block, already wearing the child-sized safety goggles Daniel had bought them both. "Me too, I want to help," Lila chimed in, more quietly but just as eager, carefully organizing the scattered tools on the lower shelf exactly as Daniel had taught her. Daniel smiled, his heart warming at the sight of his daughters. "Of course, sweethearts. Remember what I taught you. Gentle strokes, always with the grain." The twins had grown into distinctly different personalities. Sophia, usually the first to volunteer for any task, attacked her projects with boundless energy. She'd climb onto Daniel's workbench if he'd let her, fearless and determined. Lila, on the other hand, approached everything with careful consideration, often pausing to study the wood grain or sketch little designs on scraps of paper. Later that afternoon, the Willow Ridge Spring Festival transformed the town square into a whirlwind of activity. Colorful banners fluttered in the breeze, and the air smelled of cotton candy and fresh-baked pies. Daniel watched as his daughters darted between activity stations, their matching blue dresses making them easy to spot in the crowd. "Those girls of yours are a true blessing, Daniel," Mayor Margaret Thompson said, approaching with her characteristic warm smile. "They've brought such life to our little town." Before Daniel could respond, Sophia came running up, her face painted like a butterfly, while Lila followed more slowly, carefully protecting the watercolor painting she'd made at the arts and crafts table. "Look what I made, Daddy!" they exclaimed in unison, a habit that still made townspeople chuckle. "My goodness," Alice Mitchell's voice cut through the festive atmosphere as she joined their group. "Those expressions, I swear I've seen them before." She squinted at the girls, then shook her head. "Reminds me so much of someone, but I just can't place it." Daniel felt the familiar knot in his stomach tighten. Sheriff Tom Lawson, passing by with a corn dog in hand, clapped Daniel on the shoulder. "You've done right by these girls, Harper," he said quietly. "Whatever folks might whisper about, you've given them a good life." That evening, after the festival, Daniel found himself in the garage, attempting to organize years of accumulated belongings. The twins were inside, exhausted from their day of fun, watching their favorite cartoon before bedtime. As he shifted an old wooden box, one of his mother's treasured possessions, something rattled inside. Curious, Daniel examined it more closely, discovering a hidden compartment in the base. His hands trembled slightly as he pried it open. There, nestled in faded velvet, lay another necklace, identical to the one left with the twins 5 years ago. Memories flooded back. His mother and Eliza wearing matching necklaces, a 16th birthday gift they'd shared despite their differences. The delicate silver design, the unique clasp, it was unmistakable. Daniel sank onto a nearby box, the necklace heavy in his palm. All these years, he'd pushed aside his suspicions, focused on giving the twins a stable, loving home. But now, with this evidence literally in his hands, he couldn't ignore the truth any longer. These necklaces, the familiar features Alice kept noticing, the timing of it all, it had to lead back to Eliza. His fingers closed around the necklace as determination settled over him. It was time to find his sister and uncover the truth about Sophia and Lila's origins. The soft glow of Daniel's desk lamp cast long shadows across the study walls, where family photos chronicled happier times. His fingers traced over old letters, each one a piece of the puzzle he was desperately trying to solve. The clock on the wall ticked past midnight, but sleep was far from his mind. A particular photograph caught his attention, Eliza and him at their father's funeral, standing apart even then. The memory of their last conversation flooded back, sharp and painful despite the years that had passed. "You can't keep trying to control everyone's life, Daniel," Eliza had shouted, her face flushed with anger. "Mom's gone, and I need to live my own life." "Someone has to be responsible," he'd fired back. "You can't just run away from everything." Those were the last words they'd exchanged before she'd stormed out, leaving nothing but silence and regret in her wake. Daniel rubbed his tired eyes and pulled another box closer. Inside, he found their mother's old address book, its leather cover worn smooth with age. His heart quickened as he flipped through the yellowed pages, recognizing names from their shared past. The next morning found Daniel driving through familiar streets, his first stop being the Sweet Bean Cafe, where Eliza had worked during high school. The bell above the door chimed as he entered, and Grace Williams looked up from behind the counter, her face lighting with recognition. "Daniel Harper, as I live and breathe," Grace exclaimed, wiping her hands on her apron. "It's been ages." "Grace?" Daniel nodded, settling onto a worn bar stool. "I need to ask you about Eliza." Grace's smile faltered slightly. "Eliza? She left so suddenly, Must have been, 6 years ago now? Poor thing seemed troubled about something, but she never said what. Did she mention where she might go? No, honey. Just came in one morning, handed over her apron, and that was it. Though, Grace hesitated. She did seem different those last few weeks. Distracted, kept making phone calls during her breaks. Daniel's next stop was the park where they'd played as children. Michael Bennett was there, coaching Little League just as he had for the past decade. When the practice ended, Michael approached, baseball mitt in hand. Still can't believe you're asking about Eliza after all this time, Michael said, shaking his head. Last I heard from her, she was talking about heading west, but that was years ago. She stopped returning calls after a while. Each conversation left Daniel with more questions than answers. The sun was setting by the time he pulled into his driveway, his notebook filled with dead ends and vague memories. The front door burst open before he could reach it, and 2 small figures bounded out to greet him. "Daddy, you missed lunch and dinner," Sophia exclaimed, wrapping her arms around his waist. Lila hung back slightly, her observant eyes studying his face. "Are you okay, Daddy? You look sad." Daniel forced a smile, kneeling down to their level. "I'm fine, sweetheart. Just had some errands to run." "Promise?" Lila pressed, her small hand touching his cheek. "Promise," he replied, but the word felt heavy on his tongue. As he helped the girls get ready for bed that evening, their questions about where he'd been all day grew harder to deflect. Sitting alone in his kitchen later, Daniel stared at the collection of notes and dead ends spread before him. The weight of his secret pressed down on him, making even simple interactions with the twins feel strained. But as he looked at the family photos on the wall, at the happy faces of his daughters, he knew he couldn't stop searching. They deserved to know the truth about their past, even if uncovering it might change everything. Daniel stood in his mother's old bedroom, the air thick with dust and memories. Sunlight filtered through lace curtains, casting delicate patterns on the faded wallpaper. He'd avoided this room for years, but now desperation drove him to search every corner for answers about Eliza. His hands trembled slightly as he opened the heavy oak wardrobe. The familiar scent of mothballs and cedar brought back a flood of childhood memories. Methodically, he began sorting through boxes of old photographs and keepsakes, each item carrying its own weight of history. Behind a stack of old sweaters, his fingers brushed against something solid, a brown envelope he'd never seen before. It was on the woven basket where he first saw the twins. Inside, beneath yellowed envelopes and newspaper clippings, lay a photograph that made his heart stop. There was Eliza, looking exhausted but tender, holding 2 tiny bundles. The babies' faces were barely visible, but Daniel would recognize them anywhere. Sophia and Lila. His hands shook as he turned the photograph over, revealing neat handwriting he hadn't seen in years. "I couldn't do it alone. Daniel, keep them safe. I'll come back when I'm ready." The room seemed to spin around him as he sank onto the edge of his mother's bed. All this time, his suspicions had been right. The twins weren't just abandoned on his doorstep. They were family. His nieces, Eliza's daughters. Later that night, Daniel sat in his dimly lit living room, the photograph and note laid out before him on the coffee table. Emotions warred within him. Anger at Eliza for her secrecy, hurt that she hadn't trusted him enough to ask for help, and a deep, aching compassion for what she must have gone through alone. A memory surfaced. Eliza at 12, defending him from neighborhood bullies despite being younger. Another followed, the 2 of them building a treehouse together, Eliza's laughter echoing as she handed him nails. They'd been so close once before their mother's controlling nature had driven wedges between them. "Why didn't you just tell me?" he whispered to the empty room. "I would have helped you." The morning sun streamed through the kitchen windows as Daniel watched Sophia and Lila eat their breakfast. Sophia was carefully arranging her scrambled eggs into a smiley face, while Lila methodically spread peanut butter on her toast, her tongue poking out in concentration. "Daddy, can we work in the workshop today?" Sophia asked, looking up with hopeful eyes. "Please?" Lila added, her quiet voice carrying the same eagerness. Daniel's heart swelled with love for these precious girls who had changed his life so completely. Now, knowing they were Eliza's daughters, he could see traces of his sister in their mannerisms. Sophia's determined set to her jaw, Lila's thoughtful gaze. After breakfast, Daniel made a call to Mayor Margaret Thompson's office. "Margaret, I need your help with something important. It's about finding my sister." The mayor's voice was warm with concern. "Of course, Daniel. What can I do?" As he explained the situation, Daniel watched the twins through the window as they played in the backyard. They deserved to know their mother, and Eliza deserved a chance to know the amazing little girls she'd entrusted to his care. The time for secrets was over. Mayor Margaret Thompson's office was a study in understated elegance, with dark wood paneling and walls adorned with historical photographs of Willow Ridge. Daniel sat across from her massive oak desk, his hands clasped tightly around the photograph of Eliza and the twins. "I know this is unusual, Margaret," Daniel began, his voice steady despite his inner turmoil. "But I need your help finding my sister." Mayor Thompson leaned forward, her kind eyes fixed on Daniel's face. She'd known him since he was a boy, had watched him grow into the respected craftsman and devoted father he'd become. "Tell me everything, Daniel." He carefully placed the photograph on her desk, along with Eliza's note. The mayor's eyebrows rose as she studied them. "The twins, they're Eliza's daughters?" "Yes," Daniel confirmed, running a hand through his hair. "All this time they were my nieces. She left them with me that stormy night, trusting I'd keep them safe." Mayor Thompson nodded thoughtfully, her fingers tracing the edge of the photograph. "We'll need to be discreet, of course. The last thing we want is to upset the girls or create town gossip." She pulled out a notepad. "I can reach out to shelters in neighboring counties, contact hospitals. I still have connections from my days as a social worker." Hope bloomed in Daniel's chest for the first time in days. "Thank you, Margaret. I need to find her. For the girls' sake. And for hers." Meanwhile, back at Daniel's house, Sophia and Lila crept into their father's study. Afternoon sunlight streamed through the windows, illuminating dancing dust motes in the air. "We shouldn't be in here," Lila whispered, though her eyes sparkled with curiosity. Sophia was already rifling through the papers on Daniel's desk. "Don't you want to know why Daddy's been acting so weird?" Their small hands carefully sorted through documents until Lila gasped, "Sophia, look!" She held up a photograph, her eyes wide with wonder. The twins huddled together, studying the image of a young woman holding two babies. Something about her face seemed familiar, like a half-remembered dream. "That's us," Sophia breathed, pointing to the bundles. "But who's holding us?" Lila turned the photograph over, her finger tracing the handwritten note. Though they were still learning to read, they recognized enough words to understand this was something important. "Should we ask Daddy about it?" Lila asked, biting her lip. Sophia shook her head, carefully returning the photograph to its place. "Not yet. Let's try to figure it out ourselves first." Later that afternoon, Daniel pushed open the heavy doors of Willow Ridge Public Library. The familiar scent of books and polished wood greeted him as he approached the front desk, where Grace Mitchell sat sorting through index cards. "Daniel," Grace smiled warmly, "what brings you here today?" He explained his search for Eliza, watching as recognition flickered across Grace's face. "You know, now that you mention it, Eliza used to volunteer at the Cedar Grove Library, about 30 miles north. Emily Watson was the head librarian there, still is, I believe. She and Eliza were quite close." Daniel's heart quickened. "Do you have Emily's contact information?" Grace nodded, already reaching for her address book. "She's been at Cedar Grove Library for 20 years. If anyone knows where Eliza went, it might be her." As Grace wrote down the information, Daniel felt a surge of optimism. Finally, a real lead, someone who might know where his sister had gone after leaving the twins in his care. Meanwhile, the next day, the spring sunshine warmed the Willow Ridge Elementary School playground as Sophia and Lila huddled with their best friend Ben Thompson near the old oak tree. The twins had carefully smuggled the photograph from Daniel's study in Sophia's lunchbox. "Look what we found," Sophia whispered, pulling out the photograph. Ben, a curious 10-year-old with bright red hair and freckles, leaned in close. "That's you two when you were babies," he exclaimed, pointing at the bundles in the woman's arms. Lila nodded, her eyes serious. "But we don't know who she is. She looks kind of like us, doesn't she?" Ben studied the photograph carefully. "My mom works at the library in Riverview sometimes. I heard her talking about a new librarian there who looks just like this lady." The twins exchanged excited glances. "Really?" Sophia asked, her voice rising with hope. "We have to go see," Lila added, clutching her sister's arm. Ben's face lit up with an idea. "We could take the bus to Riverview tomorrow. It's Saturday, and the library's open until 5. "But what about Daddy?" Lila worried, biting her lower lip. "We can't tell him," Sophia decided. "He's been acting strange lately. What if this makes him more worried?" Meanwhile, at the Riverview Public Library, Daniel sat across from Emily Watson, a petite woman with silver-streaked hair and kind eyes. The photograph of Eliza lay between them on the polished wooden desk. "Yes, I remember her well," Emily said, adjusting her reading glasses. "She went by Elizabeth Hart here. Such a wonderful way with children. Ran our most popular reading program." Daniel's heart quickened. "Do you know where she went?" Emily pulled out a small address book. "She left about 6 months ago, but she did give me her new address. Said she was finally ready to face some things from her past." She wrote the address on a slip of paper and handed it to Daniel. Later that afternoon, the streets of Riverview bustled with weekend shoppers. Daniel walked purposefully down Mason Street, clutching Emily's note, while 3 blocks away, the twins and Ben emerged from the bus stop. "The library should be this way," Ben said, pointing north. They passed Joe's Diner just moments after Daniel had walked by. At the corner of Elm and Main, Daniel paused to check the address again, while the children crossed the parallel street just out of sight. The warm afternoon sun cast long shadows as both groups moved through the town, each unaware of the other's presence, connected by the same quest, but separated by mere minutes and city blocks. The next day, the Riverview Public Library's children's section was a cozy space filled with colorful beanbags and low wooden shelves. Sophia, Lila, and Ben tiptoed in, their eyes wide with anticipation. Behind a curved desk decorated with paper flowers sat a woman with warm brown eyes and gentle features, the same woman from their photograph. "Welcome to Storytime Corner," she said, smiling at the children. "I'm Miss Hart, the children's librarian." The twins exchanged meaningful glances. Lila clutched Sophia's hand tightly as they approached the desk. "Would you like to hear a story?" Miss Hart asked, her voice soft and inviting. Something in her expression changed as she looked at the twins more closely. A flicker of recognition, quickly masked. "Yes, please," Sophia said, studying Miss Hart's face intently. Miss Hart selected a worn copy of The Velveteen Rabbit from the shelf. As she settled into the reading chair, the sunlight caught something around her neck, a delicate silver necklace that made both twins gasp quietly. Her melodic voice brought the story to life, drawing other children to gather around. Throughout the reading, her eyes kept drifting back to Sophia and Lila, as if pulled by an invisible thread. When the story ended, Sophia stepped forward. "That's a pretty necklace," she said carefully. "My sister and I have one just like it at home." Miss Hart's hand flew to her throat, her expression suddenly guarded. "Thank you," she said stiffly, rising from her chair. "I hope you enjoyed the story. I have some work to do now." Meanwhile, across town, Daniel stood in front of a weathered apartment building, consulting the address on his paper. An elderly man with thick glasses emerged from the ground floor unit. "Looking for someone?" the man asked, introducing himself as Henry Collins, the landlord. "Yes, Elizabeth Hart or Eliza Harper, is she here?" Mr. Collins shook his head. "Moved out about 3 weeks ago. Nice lady, always quiet. Spent most of her time at the community center down the street." Daniel's shoulders slumped, but determination kept him moving. At the Riverview Community Center, he met Mrs. Linda Garcia, an energetic woman with silver-streaked hair. "Elizabeth, of course I remember her," Mrs. Garcia said warmly. "She was wonderful with the children's reading program. Just accepted a full-time position at the public library, actually. Started last week." Daniel's heart leaped. The public library here in Riverview? Mrs. Garcia nodded, and Daniel was already heading for the door, hope renewed. He hurried down the sidewalk, the library's brick building visible in the distance. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows through the library's tall windows as Daniel pushed through the heavy wooden doors. His heart pounded as he scanned the room, searching for any sign of Eliza. Through the gaps between bookshelves, he caught a fleeting glimpse of a woman with familiar brown hair moving toward the staff area. Just then, a group of chattering children rushed past him, momentarily blocking his view. Among them were Sophia and Lila, who froze for a split second when they spotted their father. Fear flashed across their faces before they ducked behind a large display of picture books, pulling Ben with them. "Quick, hide!" Sophia whispered, her hand trembling as she gripped her sister's arm. Lila peeked around the corner of the display. "What's Dad doing here?" she asked, her voice barely audible. At the circulation desk, Eliza was gathering her belongings, ready to end her shift. She paused, a strange sensation creeping over her, the feeling of being watched. Turning slowly, she surveyed the library, but saw only the usual afternoon crowd of patrons. Shaking her head, she dismissed the feeling and continued packing up her bag. Later that evening at the Riverview Cafe, Eliza sat across from her friend Sarah Miller, warming her hands around a steaming cup of tea. "Something strange happened today," Eliza said, her voice uncertain. "These twin girls came to story time. Sarah, they looked exactly like me at that age." Eliza's voice cracked. "They even noticed my necklace, said they had one just like it." She touched the silver pendant at her throat. I panicked and walked away. "Maybe it's time, Eliza," Sarah said gently. "You've built a stable life here. You're stronger now. Perhaps it's time to reach out to Daniel, to your family." Eliza stared into her tea, tears threatening to spill. "I'm scared, Sarah. What if they hate me for what I did?" In Ben's treehouse, the setting sun painted the wooden walls golden as the twins huddled with their friend. "It has to be her," Sophia insisted. "She's wearing the same necklace, and she looks just like the woman in the photo." Lila nodded eagerly. "And did you see how she kept looking at us during story time? Like she knew us somehow?" "We need to know for sure," Ben said, pulling out a notebook. "We could write her a letter or maybe come back when she's doing another story time." The twins exchanged determined looks. "We have to find out the truth," Lila declared, "even if it means getting in trouble with Dad." The early morning sun cast long shadows across Daniel's front yard as he made his way to the mailbox. His work-worn hands sorted through the usual bills and advertisements until his fingers touched an unmarked envelope. Something about its weight and texture made him pause. Inside, he found a handwritten letter, and his heart skipped a beat as he recognized Eliza's neat handwriting. "Dear Daniel, I know it's been too long and I owe you more than words can express. I'm ready to explain everything if you're willing to listen. Could we meet at Willow Ridge Park by the old oak tree where we used to play? Tomorrow at noon. Love, Eliza." Daniel's hands trembled as he read the words again. Memories flooded back, of summer days spent climbing that oak tree, of Eliza's laughter echoing across the park. He pressed the letter to his chest, hope and anxiety mixing in his stomach. Later that afternoon, while Daniel was in his workshop, Sophia and Lila crept into their bedroom, clutching the letter they'd found on the kitchen counter. Sunlight streamed through their window, illuminating the paper as they sat cross-legged on Lila's flowered bedspread. "It's from her, from Elizabeth at the library," Sophia whispered, pointing at the signature. "She's going to meet Dad tomorrow." Lila's eyes widened. "Do you think she'll tell him about us meeting her at the library?" "We have to watch what happens," Sophia declared, her voice full of determination. "We can hide behind the big bushes near the oak tree." The next day, Daniel arrived at Willow Ridge Park early, his heart pounding as he approached the old oak tree. The familiar branches stretched overhead, casting dappled shadows on the ground. Hidden behind a cluster of shrubs several yards away, Sophia and Lila held their breath as they watched their father pace nervously. Then Eliza appeared, walking slowly along the path. She looked exactly as the twins remembered from the library, wearing the same silver necklace that matched their own. Daniel and Eliza stood facing each other, neither speaking at first, years of unspoken words hanging between them. "Danny," Eliza finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm so sorry." Daniel's shoulders tensed, then relaxed. "Why didn't you tell me about the twins?" he asked softly. "I was scared," Eliza replied, tears welling in her eyes. "After Mom died, I felt so lost. When I found out I was pregnant, I knew you were the only one I could trust with them. I wanted to give them their best chance." From their hiding spot, the twins watched with wide eyes as their father and the woman from the library began to talk, their voices too low to hear clearly, but their body language speaking volumes. Tears streamed down Eliza's face as she spoke softly to Daniel. "I've been working at the library just to be close to them. I see them during story time, watching them grow, seeing their beautiful smiles." Her voice cracked with emotion. Daniel's jaw tightened, years of hurt and anger warring with the compassion in his heart. "You could have reached out sooner. They needed their mother." Before Eliza could respond, a twig snapped behind them. Two small figures tumbled out from behind the bushes, unable to contain themselves any longer. "We knew it!" Sophia exclaimed, her eyes bright with excitement. "You're Elizabeth from the library!" Lila stood slightly behind her sister, clutching the silver necklace that matched the one around Eliza's neck. "Are you really our mama?" Eliza's hand flew to her mouth, a sob escaping as she nodded. She knelt down, opening her arms uncertainly. The twins looked at Daniel, who gave them a gentle nod, his own eyes glistening with tears. In an instant, both girls rushed forward into Eliza's embrace. She held them close, years of longing pouring out as she stroked their hair and whispered, "My beautiful girls, my precious daughters." Daniel watched the scene unfold, his anger melting at the sight of their reunion. They moved to a nearby picnic table where Eliza began to share her story. "When I found out I was having twins, I was so young and scared," she explained, holding the girls' hands. "Your Uncle Daniel was always the strong one, the responsible one. I knew he could give you the stable home you deserved." "But why didn't you stay?" Lila asked, her small face serious. "I wasn't ready to be a mother then," Eliza admitted. "I needed to fix myself first, to become someone who deserved you. So I watched over you from afar, making sure you were happy and loved." Daniel leaned forward, his voice gentle. "You should have told me, Eliza. We could have figured it out together." The twins shared stories about their favorite books from the library, and how they had suspected something special about Elizabeth the librarian. Laughter mixed with tears as they began to bridge the years of separation. As the afternoon sun warmed them, Daniel made a decision. "Why don't you come home with us for dinner? The girls would love to show you their room." The twins bounced excitedly in their seats, and Eliza's face lit up with hope. "I'd like that very much," she said softly. Days after, the morning sun cast a warm glow over Willow Ridge Town Square as Daniel and Eliza walked with the twins between them. Sophia and Lila skipped along, their matching pigtails bouncing with each step. The usual bustle of the square slowed as people noticed the unfamiliar yet familiar sight. "Is that Eliza Harper?" whispered Mrs. Peterson to her friend outside the bakery. "After all these years?" Neighbor Alice Mitchell stood frozen outside her flower shop, her watering can tilted precariously. Recognition dawned on her face as she hurried over to the family. "Eliza? My goodness, it is you. Now I know why the girls always reminded me of someone. They're the spitting image of you." Eliza squeezed the twins' hands, drawing strength from their presence. "Hello, Alice. Yes, I'm back." The twins beamed proudly. "This is our mama," Sophia announced, while Lila nodded enthusiastically. More townspeople gathered, their reactions ranging from surprised whispers to warm smiles. Mayor Margaret Thompson emerged from the courthouse, her face lighting up at the sight. She strode purposefully toward them, her heels clicking against the cobblestones. "Welcome home, Eliza," she said warmly, embracing her. "We've missed you in Willow Ridge." Daniel stood protectively close to his sister, watching as curious onlookers gathered. Some faces showed judgment, others confusion, but Mayor Thompson's acceptance seemed to set the tone for many. At the community center that evening, the wooden chairs creaked under the weight of what seemed like the entire town. Whispers filled the room as Daniel and Eliza stood before their neighbors, hands clasped in solidarity. Mayor Thompson tapped her gavel, bringing the room to attention. "Friends and neighbors," she began, her voice clear and strong. "Today we witness not just a family reunion, but a reminder of what makes our community special, our capacity for understanding and forgiveness." Eliza stepped forward, her voice trembling slightly but growing stronger with each word. "I made mistakes," she admitted. "I was young and scared, but I never stopped loving my daughters or my brother. I'm here now asking for a chance to make things right." Daniel added his own voice, steady and sincere. "My sister's return has brought healing to our family. We hope our community can share in this healing too." The silence that followed was broken by Mrs. Anderson, the elderly librarian. "I remember when you two were children," she said, dabbing at her eyes. "It's good to see you together again." One by one, townspeople stood to offer words of support. Even those who had been skeptical seemed moved by the family's honesty. Later that week, Daniel's backyard buzzed with activity. The smell of grilled hamburgers wafted through the air as children chased each other across the lawn. Ben Thompson and the twins had organized an elaborate game of hide-and-seek, their laughter echoing through the trees. Sarah Miller sat with Eliza on the porch swing, catching up over lemonade. "I told you it would work out," she said, squeezing her friend's hand. Neighbor Alice Mitchell arrived with her famous potato salad, while Mayor Thompson brought an enormous chocolate cake. The gathering felt less like a formal event and more like a homecoming, with old hurts giving way to new memories. Daniel watched from the grill as Eliza showed the twins the matching necklaces, now reunited like their family. The silver pieces caught the sunlight, throwing tiny sparkles across their faces as they listened to their mother explain their significance. "These necklaces were a gift from your grandmother," Eliza explained, her voice soft with memory. "Now they're together again, just like us." The morning sun streamed through the windows of Daniel Harper's home as Eliza carried her last suitcase through the front door. Her few possessions looked small in the spacious entryway, a reminder of how little she'd accumulated during her years away. Daniel watched from the kitchen doorway, his hands wrapped around a coffee mug. "That's the last of it," Eliza said softly, placing the worn suitcase beside the others. The twins peered down from the top of the stairs, still in their pajamas, whispering to each other. Their eyes followed their mother's movements with a mixture of curiosity and uncertainty. "Girls, come help set the table for breakfast," Daniel called, breaking the quiet moment. The twins scampered down, their sock-covered feet pattering against the wooden steps. In the kitchen, the family gathered around the table where Daniel had prepared pancakes, a weekend tradition. Eliza reached for the syrup at the same time as Daniel, their hands awkwardly colliding. "Sorry," they said in unison, echoing their childhood apologies. "How do you like your pancakes, Mama?" Lila asked tentatively, testing out the word "mama" as if trying on new shoes. "With lots of butter," Eliza replied, smiling. "Just like you both do, actually." The conversation drifted into polite small talk about the weather and plans for the day. After breakfast, Eliza began collecting dishes, but Daniel stepped in. "Oh, I usually load them this way," he said as she arranged plates differently in the dishwasher. "It fits more efficiently." Eliza nodded, stepping back. "Of course, you have your system." Later that morning at Willow Ridge Elementary School, Sophia and Lila found themselves surrounded by curious stares during recess. A group of students huddled near the monkey bars, pointing and whispering. "Is it true your mom abandoned you?" Jenny Matthews asked bluntly, approaching the twins as they played hopscotch with Ben Thompson. Sophia's chalk piece froze mid-number. Lila's lower lip trembled slightly. "That's none of your business," Ben said firmly, stepping between Jenny and the twins. "Why don't you go play somewhere else?" "I heard she's living with them now," another classmate chimed in. "My mom says it's weird." Mrs. Parker, noticing the gathering crowd, walked over with purpose. "Is everything all right here?" "They're being nosy about Sophia and Lila's mom," Ben reported, still standing protectively near his friends. Mrs. Parker gathered the children around her. "Let's have a discussion about respect and privacy," she said, her voice gentle but firm. "How would you feel if everyone was talking about your family?" The gossiping students looked down at their shoes, properly chastised. As the sun began to set, Eliza sat on the front porch with Sarah Miller, both women cradling steaming mugs of tea. The wooden swing creaked softly as they rocked. "I feel like an intruder in their routine," Eliza confessed, watching the sky turn pink. "Daniel has his way of doing everything, and the girls, they look at me like they're not sure what to do with me." Sarah leaned forward, her face earnest. "Give them time, Eliza. You're all learning to dance together, and sometimes you'll step on each other's toes. That's normal." "This morning Lila called me Mama at breakfast," Eliza said, her voice catching. "But then I caught her watching me all day like she was studying me, like she was trying to figure out if I deserved the title." "Children are remarkably resilient," Sarah assured her. "They want to love you, Eliza. They just need time to trust that you're really staying." Eliza sipped her tea, considering Sarah's words. "Maybe I should plan something special with them? But what if I'm pushing too hard, too fast?" "Follow their lead," Sarah suggested. "Be present, be patient. The rest will come naturally." The autumn breeze rippled across Willow Ridge Lake, sending golden leaves dancing through the crisp morning air. Eliza Harper stood at the water's edge, watching as Daniel helped the twins into their life jackets. Her suggestion for a family outing had been met with enthusiastic nods from Sophia and Lila, though she noticed their occasional uncertain glances in her direction. "Everyone ready?" Daniel called out, steadying the canoe near the shore. The twins bounced on their toes, their matching braids swinging with excitement. "Can I sit in the front?" Sophia asked, already reaching for the bow. "Me too," Lila chimed in, not wanting to be separated from her sister. Eliza smiled, remembering how she and Daniel had been the same way as children. "How about we take turns? That way everyone gets a chance to be captain?" The twins considered this, exchanging one of their silent twin conversations before nodding in agreement. Daniel helped them climb in, then gestured for Eliza to take her place. The canoe rocked gently as they settled in, paddles dipping into the clear water. As they glided across the lake, Eliza pointed out various birds and trees, drawing on memories of nature walks with their mother. The twins listened intently, their initial reserve gradually melting away as they asked questions and shared their own observations. Near the shore, where smooth stones dotted the beach, Eliza demonstrated the art of stone skipping. "Watch how I flick my wrist," she explained, sending a flat stone dancing across the water's surface. 5 perfect skips before it disappeared beneath the ripples. "Show me again," Lila requested, clutching her own carefully selected stone. Eliza knelt beside her, gently adjusting her daughter's grip and stance. "Like this," she guided, and together they released the stone. It skipped twice before sinking, but Lila's delighted laugh echoed across the water. Sophia joined in, and soon all 3 were competing to see who could get the most skips. Their laughter carried across the lake, genuine and unrehearsed. Daniel watched from where he was setting up their picnic, a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. Later, as they sat on the red and white checkered blanket, Sophia picked at the crust of her sandwich. "Where did you go?" she asked suddenly, her voice small but clear. "When you were away?" Eliza set down her apple, meeting her daughter's questioning gaze. "I lived in different places," she began carefully. "I worked in libraries, helping other children learn to read. But I thought about you both every single day. Did you not want us?" Lila's question came out barely above a whisper. "Oh, sweetheart," Eliza's voice cracked with emotion. "I wanted you more than anything in the world, but sometimes grown-ups make mistakes when they're scared. I wasn't sure I could be a good mother then, but I never stopped loving you." Eliza reached out, gently taking both girls' hands in hers. Love isn't like a pie that gets smaller when you share it. It's more like the stars in the sky. Having more doesn't make each one shine less brightly. Your daddy is wonderful, and I'm so grateful he's taken such good care of you. I hope that maybe in time, you'll have room in your hearts for me too." The twins squeezed her hands, and for a moment, the only sound was the gentle lapping of waves against the shore and the rustling of leaves overhead. The autumn sunlight streamed through the workshop windows, catching dust motes that danced around Daniel's latest project, a hand-carved dining table. The familiar scent of sawdust and wood stain filled the air as he carefully sanded the table's edge. The bell above the door chimed, drawing his attention to a well-dressed man entering the workshop. "Daniel Harper?" The man's voice carried a polished tone that seemed out of place in the rustic setting. "I'm Ethan Walker. I heard you're the best craftsman in the area." Daniel wiped his hands on his apron and offered a friendly smile. "Welcome to Harper's Custom Furniture. What can I help you with?" Ethan walked slowly around the workshop, running his fingers along finished pieces with calculated interest. "Beautiful work. I'm interested in commissioning several pieces for my new home." He paused at a family photo on the wall. "Your daughters are lovely. They remind me of someone I used to know." Something in Ethan's tone made Daniel's shoulders tense. The man's eyes lingered too long on the photograph. "I understand Eliza Harper has returned to Willow Ridge," Ethan continued casually. "Such a small world. We were quite close once upon a time." Daniel's hand stilled on the sandpaper. "I prefer to discuss business during consultations, Mr. Walker." Of course. Ethan's smile didn't reach his eyes. "I was just reminiscing. Eliza and I shared some intense times together. How is she adjusting to motherhood?" The question carried a weight that made Daniel's instincts flare. "I think we're done here, Mr. Walker. If you're interested in furniture, you can schedule an appointment through my website." Ethan held up his hands in mock surrender. "No offense intended. I'll be in touch about those pieces." He moved toward the door, but turned back for one last look, his gaze sharp and calculating. The bell chimed again as he left, leaving behind an unsettling silence. Later that evening, Daniel found Eliza in the kitchen preparing dinner. The twins' laughter drifted in from the backyard where they were playing. "Eliza, we need to talk." Daniel's serious tone made her turn from the stove. "A black man named Ethan Walker came to the workshop today." The wooden spoon clattered against the pot as Eliza's hand began to shake, her face drained of color. "What did he want?" "He claimed to be interested in furniture, but he asked about you. About the girls." Daniel stepped closer, concerned by her reaction. "Who is he, Eliza?" She gripped the counter for support. "Ethan was... We were together before I had the twins. He was charming at first, but then..." Her voice trembled. "He became controlling, manipulative. The things he did, Daniel, I ran away when I found out I was pregnant. I couldn't let him near my babies." "Why didn't you tell me?" Daniel asked gently. "I thought I was finally free of him." Tears welled in her eyes. "I never wanted to bring this danger to your door. To the girls." Daniel pulled her into a protective hug. "We need to tell Sheriff Lawson. He should know about this." "You don't understand," Eliza whispered. "Ethan is smart, calculating. He knows how to work the system." "We'll protect our family," Daniel assured her firmly. "Whatever it takes." That night, Daniel methodically checked every window and door lock in the house. He installed new security lights and made sure the alarm system was armed. In the twins' room, Eliza sat in the rocking chair, watching Sophia and Lila sleep peacefully. Their small faces, illuminated by the nightlight, showed no sign of the worry that now plagued their parents. Outside, partially hidden by shadows, a figure stood motionless, observing the warm glow of the Harper home. The security light caught a glimpse of Ethan's face before he melted back into the darkness. Sheriff Tom Lawson's office felt warm despite its official nature, with morning sunlight streaming through Venetian blinds. Daniel and Eliza sat across from the sheriff's sturdy oak desk, their shoulders tense as they shared their concerns. "So this Ethan Walker just showed up at your workshop?" Sheriff Lawson's pen scratched against his notepad as he documented every detail. "Yes," Daniel replied, his hand protectively covering Eliza's trembling one. He pretended to be interested in furniture, but his questions focused on Eliza and the girls. Eliza's voice quivered as she spoke. "He was violent, Tom. Not always with his fists, but with his words, his control. I left him when I discovered I was pregnant." Sheriff Lawson's weathered face creased with concern. "We'll start the paperwork for a restraining order right away. I'll also alert my deputies to increase patrols around your home and the school." Later that day at Willow Ridge Elementary, Sophia, Lila, and Ben sat at their usual picnic table, sharing lunch under the warm autumn sun. Sophia was halfway through her sandwich when something caught her eye. "Look," she whispered, nudging Lila. Across the street, partially hidden behind a tree, stood a man in a dark jacket, watching them intently. Lila's sandwich dropped to her lap. "I don't like this," she murmured, scooting closer to her sister. "We should tell Mrs. Parker," Ben suggested, already starting to stand up. When they looked back, the man had vanished, leaving only an uneasy feeling in his wake. The twins exchanged worried glances but decided to keep quiet about it, not wanting to add to their parents' concerns. The early evening sky had turned dusky purple when sharp knocks echoed through the Harper home. Daniel opened the door to find Ethan Walker standing on his porch, his polite facade replaced by barely contained anger. "I need to speak with Eliza," Ethan demanded, attempting to step forward. Daniel blocked the doorway with his body. "Leave now, or I'm calling the sheriff." "You don't understand what she owes me," Ethan snarled, his charm evaporating. "The secrets we share. I don't owe you anything anymore." Eliza's voice rang out clear and strong as she appeared beside Daniel. "You have no power over me or my family." "You think you can just—" Ethan's threat was cut short by the sound of approaching sirens. Sheriff Lawson's patrol car pulled up, its lights painting the scene in red and blue. "Mr. Walker," Sheriff Lawson called out, stepping from his vehicle, "I believe it's time for you to leave. Mrs. Mitchell next door called about a disturbance." Ethan's jaw clenched as he glared at Eliza, but he backed away under Sheriff Lawson's stern gaze. "This isn't over," he muttered, before the sheriff firmly escorted him to his car. In the Harpers' living room, the afternoon sun cast long shadows across the worried faces of Daniel and Eliza as they gathered Sophia and Lila on the comfortable old couch. The twins sensed the seriousness in their parents' expressions and sat close together, their small hands intertwined. "Girls," Daniel began gently, "we need to talk about something important." He glanced at Eliza, who nodded encouragingly. "Remember the man you've seen watching the house?" Eliza asked softly. "His name is Ethan Walker. He's someone from my past, someone who wasn't very nice to me." Sophia's grip tightened on her sister's hand. "Is he the man we saw at school?" Daniel and Eliza exchanged alarmed looks. "You saw him at school?" Daniel asked, his voice tight with concern. Lila nodded. "He was across the street watching us during lunch." "That's exactly why we need to talk," Eliza said, moving to sit between her daughters. "We want you to be safe, so we need to make some plans." They spent the next hour creating safety rules. Always stay together, memorize emergency phone numbers, and never go anywhere with strangers. The twins listened intently, their initial fear gradually giving way to determination. Later that evening, the town hall buzzed with concerned voices as Mayor Margaret Thompson stood at the podium, her presence commanding attention. The wooden benches were filled with familiar faces, all turned toward the front of the room. "Friends and neighbors," Mayor Thompson began, "our community faces a situation that requires our collective vigilance. While I cannot share all details, we have a visitor in town who poses a potential threat to one of our families." Sheriff Lawson stepped forward, his badge catching the fluorescent light. "We're implementing increased patrols, but we need your help. Report any suspicious activity immediately." Alice Mitchell, her gray hair neatly pinned back, raised her hand. "I've already organized a neighborhood watch schedule. We'll take turns monitoring the streets around the Harper home." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. People began signing up for watch shifts, offering their support and protection. In a rundown motel room on the outskirts of Willow Ridge, Ethan Walker paced the worn carpet, his cell phone pressed to his ear. The dim light from a single lamp cast his shadow against the peeling wallpaper. "Listen," he growled into the phone. "I know it's here. Eliza has the necklace, the one with the hidden compartment. She doesn't even know what it contains." The voice on the other end crackled with static. "You better find it, Walker. The boss isn't known for his patience." "I'll get it," Ethan replied, his knuckles white around the phone. "One way or another, I'll get that necklace and what's inside it. Just keep the pressure off until I deliver." The late afternoon sun cast long shadows between the rows of storage units as Eliza and Daniel made their way down the narrow paths. Unit 247 loomed before them, its padlock dulled by years of weather. Eliza's hands trembled slightly as she worked the key into the lock. "I haven't been here since before the twins were born," she whispered, pulling up the metal door with a grinding sound. The unit was packed with cardboard boxes and old furniture, layers of dust coating everything. Daniel held up a flashlight, its beam cutting through the musty air. They worked methodically, moving boxes and searching through contents. "Here," Eliza called out, pulling a weathered wooden jewelry box from beneath a stack of photo albums. Inside, nestled in faded velvet, lay an ornate silver locket alongside a leather-bound journal. "Mom's journal," Daniel said softly, taking the book while Eliza examined the locket. "I remember she used to write in this every night." Eliza ran her finger along the locket's intricate engravings. "This is what Ethan's after. Mom always said it was more than just jewelry, that it held something important for our future." In attorney Michael Bennett's office, sunlight filtered through Venetian blinds onto polished mahogany furniture. Michael adjusted his reading glasses as he examined the locket and flipped through the journal's yellowed pages. "Your mother was very thorough," he said, looking up at Eliza and Daniel. "She established a trust that could only be accessed when specific conditions were met, namely the reunification of her children and the presentation of this locket." "What exactly did she leave?" Daniel asked. "Property deeds, investment accounts, and family heirlooms. Quite substantial in value. She wanted to ensure her legacy would bring her children back together." Michael pulled out several forms. "We can begin the process immediately to secure everything legally." When they returned home, the house felt different, colder somehow. Sophia and Lila were at their afternoon art class with a trusted neighbor, but something was wrong. Daniel spotted it first, a white envelope on the floor just inside the front door. Eliza's hands shook as she read the note inside. "He wants me to bring the locket to Miller's Point tomorrow at midnight," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "He says if I don't come alone, he'll—" She couldn't finish the sentence. Daniel took the note, his jaw clenching as he read. "We're calling Sheriff Lawson right now. You're not facing him alone, Eliza. Not this time." In Daniel's living room, the atmosphere was thick with tension as Sheriff Tom Lawson spread out a map across the coffee table. Attorney Michael Bennett sat in an armchair, reviewing documents, while Daniel and Eliza huddled together on the couch. "Miller's Point gives us good visibility and multiple access points," Sheriff Lawson explained, pointing to various locations. "We'll have deputies positioned here, here, and here, close enough to respond quickly, but far enough to remain undetected. The important thing is maintaining control of the situation," Michael added, adjusting his glasses. "We need to ensure the exchange happens on our terms." Eliza sat up straighter, her voice firm. "I need to be the one to face him. He needs to see that I'm not afraid anymore." Daniel squeezed her hand. "We'll be right there with you, even if you can't see us." Sheriff Lawson nodded. "Deputy Evans will equip you with a panic button and wire. One press, and we'll move in immediately." Later that evening, Eliza sat cross-legged on the floor between the twins' beds in their cozy bedroom. Soft lamplight cast a warm glow as she held their hands. "Remember how we talked about being brave?" she asked gently. "Sometimes grown-ups have to face scary things to protect the people they love." Sophia's lower lip trembled. "Is the bad man going to hurt you?" "No, sweetie," Eliza assured her. "Your Uncle Daniel and Sheriff Lawson won't let that happen. I just need you to be brave for one more night." Lila reached under her pillow and pulled out her half of the necklace. "Will you wear this? For good luck?" Tears welled in Eliza's eyes as she accepted the precious gift. "How about we make a promise?" She unclasped both pieces of the necklace and gave each twin a portion. "These pieces belong together, just like our family. Nothing can change that." The three embraced tightly, their tears mixing with gentle laughter. In Daniel's workshop, Deputy Rachel Evans demonstrated the panic button to Eliza while Sheriff Lawson reviewed the final details of their plan. "Press it twice to activate," Rachel explained, showing Eliza how to conceal the small device. "The signal reaches up to half a mile." Daniel paced nearby, his worried eyes never leaving his sister. "Are you absolutely sure about this, Eliza?" She nodded, determination evident in her stance. "It's time to end this, Daniel. For all of us." The twilight cast long shadows across Willow Ridge Park as Eliza Harper stood near the old oak tree, her fingers nervously touching the heirloom locket that hung around her neck. The evening breeze rustled through the leaves, carrying with it a sense of foreboding. Ethan Walker emerged from the shadows, his face drawn and anxious. His eyes darted around before settling on the locket. "You came," he said, his voice rough with tension. "I did," Eliza replied steadily. "This has to end, Ethan. Just give me the locket and it will." His hands fidgeted at his sides. "There are people, dangerous people, who want what it leads to." "The inheritance is legally mine," Eliza said. "Whatever debts you have, this isn't the solution." Before Ethan could respond, a figure stepped out from behind a nearby tree. Marcus Reed, a tall man with cold eyes, approached them with measured steps. "How touching," Marcus sneered. "But I'm afraid this little reunion is over. Hand over the locket." Ethan's face paled. "Marcus, this wasn't part of the deal." "The deal changed," Marcus cut him off sharply. "Now both of you owe me." Daniel Harper, who had been watching from his hidden position, couldn't stay back any longer. He strode forward to stand beside his sister. Sheriff Lawson and Deputy Evans maintained their positions, quietly radioing for backup. "You're making a mistake," Ethan said to Marcus, stepping between him and Eliza. "These people aren't part of this." "I'm not leaving without that locket," Marcus growled, reaching into his jacket. "No," Eliza's voice rang out clear and strong. "This belongs to my family. You have no right to it." The street lamps flickered on, casting harsh light over the tense scene. Marcus took a threatening step forward, but Ethan blocked his path. "Back off, Marcus," Ethan warned. "This is over." The sound of approaching sirens filled the air. Sheriff Lawson emerged from his position, gun drawn. "Freeze! Hands where I can see them." Marcus turned to run but was cut off by Deputy Evans and several arriving officers. Within moments, he was tackled and handcuffed. As officers led him away, Ethan turned to Eliza, his shoulders slumped. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I never meant for any of this to happen." Sheriff Lawson stepped forward, handcuffs ready. "Mr. Walker, you'll need to come with us." In the stark interview room of Willow Ridge Police Station, Ethan Walker sat across from Eliza Harper, his shoulders hunched with remorse. Sheriff Tom Lawson stood quietly by the door, watching the exchange with careful attention. "I've been running from my mistakes for too long," Ethan said, his voice barely above a whisper. "The gambling debts, the people I got involved with. I thought the locket was my way out. But I was wrong." Eliza studied his face, seeing genuine regret in his eyes. "We all make choices we regret, Ethan. What matters is what we do next." "I'll testify against Marcus," he offered. "Everything I know about his operation, and I want to get help. Real help this time." Sheriff Lawson nodded approvingly. "That would certainly work in your favor." "If you're serious about rehabilitation," Eliza said softly, "I'll speak on your behalf at the hearing. Everyone deserves a second chance." Back at the Harper home, Sophia and Lila burst through the front door as soon as they heard their parents' car pull up. They wrapped their arms around Eliza and Daniel in fierce hugs, their faces bright with relief. "Is the bad man gone?" Lila asked, her small hand gripping Eliza's sleeve. "Yes, sweetheart," Daniel assured her. "We're all safe now." The doorbell rang and Alice Mitchell appeared with a still warm apple pie in her hands. "I thought you all could use something sweet today," she said with a warm smile. Later that evening, the family gathered at the Willow Ridge Community Center, where dozens of townspeople had assembled to show their support. Mayor Margaret Thompson stood at the front of the room, her voice carrying clearly through the space. "Today we celebrate not just the safety of the Harper family, but the strength of our community," she announced. "When one of us faces trouble, we all stand together. Sheriff Lawson stepped forward to address the crowd. "I'm happy to report that Marcus Reed is in custody, and thanks to Mr. Walker's cooperation, we've uncovered a significant criminal operation. Our town is safer for it." Eliza, surrounded by Daniel and the twins, felt tears welling in her eyes as she looked at the familiar faces around her. "Thank you," she said simply. "Thank you all for being here for us." The community center buzzed with warm conversation and laughter as people shared food and stories, the recent darkness giving way to light and hope. Sunlight streamed through the kitchen windows of the Harper home as the family gathered for breakfast. The aroma of fresh coffee and toast filled the air while Eliza served scrambled eggs to the twins. "I've been thinking," Eliza said, settling into her chair. "Working at the library in Riverview reminded me how much I love helping children discover books." Sophia's eyes lit up. "Like when you read us The Secret Garden last week?" "Exactly like that," Eliza smiled. "I'd love to start a reading program here in Willow Ridge." "We could help," Lila chimed in, practically bouncing in her seat. "We could make pictures for the stories." Daniel, who had been quietly sipping his coffee, set down his mug. "You know, Mom's old bookstore is still empty. It's been sitting there since she passed." "The one on Main Street?" Eliza asked, memories flooding back of afternoons spent among the shelves. "It needs work," Daniel admitted, "but it could be perfect." The twins exchanged excited glances. "Can we see it?" they asked in unison. Later that morning, the family stood inside the dusty interior of the old Harper bookstore. Sheets covered the furniture, and years of neglect showed in the cobwebs and faded wallpaper, but the bones of the place remained strong. "Look at all these books," Sophia exclaimed, pulling a sheet off a shelf. Ben Thompson, who had tagged along, sneezed as dust filled the air. "My dad could help with the electrical work," he offered. Alice Mitchell appeared at the door with cleaning supplies. "I thought you might need these," she said, stepping inside. "This place holds so many memories." The family and their friends got to work. Daniel repaired loose floorboards while Eliza and Alice sorted through boxes of books. The twins, with Ben's help, wiped down shelves and arranged children's books by color. "Look what I found," Lila called out, holding up a beautifully bound copy of Peter Pan. "That's from your grandmother's vintage collection," Eliza explained, carefully taking the book. "We should create a special section for these treasures." As the days passed, the bookstore transformed. Fresh paint brightened the walls, new curtains welcomed the sunlight, and carefully arranged books filled the polished shelves. Reading nooks with comfortable chairs invited visitors to stay and explore. On opening day, Mayor Thompson stood before the gathered crowd, scissors in hand, ready to cut the ribbon across Harper's Haven's entrance. "This bookstore represents the heart of our community," she declared, "a place where stories bring people together." Eliza stepped forward, her voice full of emotion. "Thank you all for helping us create this space. We hope it becomes a second home for every child who loves books." The ribbon fell, and eager children rushed inside, their eyes wide with wonder at the colorful displays and cozy reading corners. The twins proudly showed their friends around, pointing out their favorite books and the special vintage collection. The afternoon sun filtered through Harper's Haven's large windows as children settled onto colorful cushions scattered across the floor. Eliza sat in a worn leather armchair, her voice bringing "The Wind in the Willows" to life. Her animated gestures and changing voices held the young audience spellbound. At nearby tables, Sophia and Lila moved between groups of children, helping them create paper boats like the ones from the story. Sophia showed a young boy how to fold the perfect crease, while Lila offered encouragement to those struggling with the craft. "Look, Mrs. Harper," a little girl called out, holding up her decorated boat. "I added sparkles like starlight on the river." Eliza beamed with pride as she watched her daughters guide the other children. Sophia demonstrated natural leadership, explaining steps clearly and patiently, while Lila's gentle nature helped shy children feel included. Parents gathered at the edges of the room, smiling as their children participated enthusiastically. Mrs. Johnson, a local teacher, approached Eliza. "This program has made such a difference. My son Tommy never enjoyed reading before, but now he can't wait for story time." Later that evening, the Harpers gathered at Town Hall, where Mayor Margaret Thompson stood at the podium. The room buzzed with excitement as she presented the Community Service Award. "The Harper family has shown us the power of second chances and healing," Mayor Thompson declared. "Through Harper's Haven, they've created more than just a bookstore. They've built a sanctuary of learning and growth for our children." Eliza accepted the award, her hands trembling slightly. "This town didn't just welcome us back," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "You helped us rebuild our family. Every person in this room played a part in our journey." Sheriff Tom Lawson and Alice Mitchell led the standing ovation, while Daniel squeezed Eliza's shoulder supportively. Tears glistened in eyes throughout the room as the community celebrated their shared triumph. As night fell, the family gathered in their backyard. The crackling fire pit cast a warm glow as they roasted marshmallows under the stars. Sophia and Lila sat cross-legged on a blanket, their faces illuminated by the flames. "I want to write stories like the ones we read at the bookstore," Sophia announced, carefully turning her marshmallow. "And I want to draw pictures for them," Lila added, leaning against her mother's knee. Eliza wrapped her arms around both girls. "You can do anything you set your minds to," she assured them, exchanging a knowing look with Daniel. They sat together, watching the sparks rise into the night sky. The reunited necklace pieces now displayed proudly in the bookstore's vintage collection case, a symbol of their healed family bonds. Harper's Haven hummed with activity as children filled every corner of the transformed bookstore. Ben Thompson stood before a group of eager young writers, his enthusiasm infectious as he explained the basics of storytelling. "Remember," he said, gesturing to the whiteboard behind him, "every good story needs a beginning, middle, and end, just like your favorite books." Eliza moved between the tables, offering gentle guidance to students struggling with their assignments. She paused to watch Sophia help a younger girl sound out difficult words, while Lila sat with a shy boy who was gaining confidence in reading aloud. "Mrs. Harper," called Tina, a third grader who had once refused to read in class, "I got an A on my book report." She proudly displayed her paper, decorated with colorful stickers. Daniel, working at the front desk, overheard parents discussing the program's impact. "Tommy's teacher says his reading level has jumped 2 grades, one mother shared excitedly. The success stories multiplied weekly. Children who once dreaded reading now eagerly participated in writing contests and reading challenges. The transformation caught the attention of educators from neighboring towns, who approached Eliza about expanding the program. At the Willow Ridge Annual Festival, strings of twinkling lights crisscrossed the town square. Mayor Margaret Thompson took the stage, her voice carrying over the festive crowd. "Harper's Haven represents the heart of our community," she announced. "What began as a simple reading program has grown into something extraordinary." Sheriff Tom Lawson and Alice Mitchell unveiled a bronze plaque commemorating the bookstore's contribution to literacy. The crowd erupted in applause as Eliza and Daniel stepped forward. "We're honored to announce the establishment of the Eleanor Harper Memorial Scholarship," Eliza said, her voice steady with purpose. "Our mother believed in the power of education to change lives. This fund will ensure her vision continues." Daniel added, "Every child deserves the chance to discover the magic of books." As the festival continued below, the Harper family gathered on their porch. The evening air carried the sounds of music and laughter. Sophia and Lila sat on the porch swing, their faces glowing with contentment. "I want to be a teacher," Sophia declared. "Like you, Mom." Lila nodded enthusiastically. "And I want to help kids who struggle with reading, just like we do at the bookstore." Eliza and Daniel exchanged proud glances. Their mother's spirit lived on in these 2 remarkable girls. The morning sun filtered through Harper's Haven's windows, casting long shadows across the empty shelves. Eliza arranged a display of new children's books while Daniel dusted the reading nooks. The twins sat at a table, sorting through returned books and giggling over their favorite illustrations. The bell above the door chimed as Mr. James Anderson, their mail carrier, stepped inside. "Morning, Harpers. Got something interesting here. A registered letter." He held up an aged envelope. "It's addressed to Margaret Harper. Been lost in transit for quite a while, according to the postmarks." Eliza's hands trembled slightly as she accepted the letter. "Thank you, James." She studied the foreign stamps and weathered paper. Daniel moved closer, placing a supportive hand on her shoulder. "Should we open it?" Together, they carefully broke the seal. Inside, they found a single sheet of paper covered in elegant handwriting and a folded, faded map. Eliza read aloud, her voice barely above a whisper. "My dearest Margaret, the time has come to share what we discussed all those years ago. The legacy must continue." The twins abandoned their task and gathered around their mother and uncle. "What legacy?" Sophia asked, peering at the mysterious map. "I'm not sure," Eliza replied. "But look at these markings. They seem familiar somehow." The family moved their investigation to the attic, where dust motes danced in beams of sunlight streaming through the small window. Daniel pulled down boxes while Eliza examined their mother's old journals. "Listen to this entry," she said, running her finger along a yellowed page. "The mission must remain secret, but the potential impact on our community could change everything." Meanwhile, Sophia and Lila explored an ornate trunk in the corner. "Mom, Uncle Daniel, look!" Lila called out. She pointed to a small panel that didn't quite match the trunk's interior. Sophia pressed it gently, revealing a hidden compartment. Inside lay a collection of travel artifacts, postcards, photographs, and a peculiar key with an intricate design. Daniel held the key up to the map. "The symbol here, it matches perfectly." That evening, the family gathered around their dining room table, spreading out their discoveries. Ben Thompson leaned forward, examining the documents with keen interest. "These dates and locations could be significant," he said, jotting down notes. "But what if it leads nowhere?" Eliza wondered aloud. "Or what if it's too dangerous?" "Grandma wanted to help people," Sophia said firmly. "That's what the journals say." Lila nodded in agreement. "We should finish what she started." Daniel looked around the table at each face, seeing determination in their expressions. "Then it's settled. We'll do this together, as a family." The afternoon sun streamed through the tall windows of Willow Ridge Public Library as the Harper family huddled around a large oak table covered with books and documents. Librarian Grace Mitchell approached with another stack of historical records. "I found these town archives from the 1940s, she said, carefully placing them on the table. They mentioned several humanitarian organizations active during that period. Eliza and Daniel pored over their mother's journal while the twins examined old newspapers. Ben Thompson sat nearby, cross-referencing dates and locations on his laptop. "Look at this," Eliza said, pointing to a passage. "Mom writes about safeguarding our heritage for future generations. There are references to an international network dedicated to protecting cultural artifacts during conflicts." Grace nodded thoughtfully. "That matches these records. Several prominent Willow Ridge residents were involved in preserving important historical items." Daniel spread out the map on the table. "These markings, they're right here in town, the old St. Michael's Chapel on Cedar Hill." The family drove to the abandoned chapel as the afternoon sun cast long shadows across its weathered stone walls. Ben Thompson met them there, flashlight in hand. "The building's been empty for decades," he said, helping them force open the heavy wooden door. Inside, dust motes danced in beams of light filtering through stained glass windows. The twins stayed close to Eliza as Daniel examined the floor, comparing it to the map. "Here," he said, kneeling beside a section of wooden flooring. "These boards are different." Together, they lifted the loose planks, revealing a narrow staircase descending into darkness. The key from the trunk fit perfectly into an ancient lock. The hidden chamber below took their breath away. Shelves lined the walls, holding carefully preserved artifacts, delicate pottery, manuscripts in protective cases, and paintings wrapped in special material. In the center of the room sat a wooden box containing a letter sealed with wax. Eliza's hands trembled as she opened the envelope addressed to "My dear children." She read their mother's words aloud, explaining her work with an international organization dedicated to protecting cultural treasures. Margaret Harper had served as a guardian, ensuring these pieces of history would survive for future generations. "Mom wanted us to share these with everyone," Sophia said, carefully examining a small statue. But we need to do it right, Ben cautioned. These items will need proper preservation and legal documentation. Daniel nodded. We should contact museum experts, get professional advice before making any decisions. For now, we keep this between us, Eliza said, looking around at her family. Until we know the best way to honor Mom's wishes. They secured the chamber before leaving, each carrying the weight of their mother's legacy and the responsibility it brought. In Dr. Amelia Reynolds's prestigious office at the State University, Eliza and Daniel sat before an impressive desk covered with carefully arranged photographs of the artifacts they'd discovered. Dr. Reynolds adjusted her wire-rimmed glasses, examining each image with growing amazement. "This is extraordinary," she breathed, picking up a photo of an ornate manuscript. "These pieces, they're not just valuable, they're historically significant. Some of these items were believed lost during the war." Daniel leaned forward. "Our mother never mentioned any of this. We had no idea." "Margaret Harper was part of a remarkable network," Dr. Reynolds explained. "These artifacts need proper authentication, climate-controlled storage, and careful documentation. The academic community would be fascinated by this discovery." "What's the first step?" Eliza asked. "I can help coordinate with several universities and museums. We'll need to establish provenance and follow legal procedures to ensure everything is properly registered." Dr. Reynolds pulled out some forms. "I'd be honored to help curate an exhibition." Later that evening at Harper's Haven, Mayor Margaret Thompson visited, her face bright with enthusiasm. "What an incredible legacy," she said, examining the preliminary plans for the exhibition. The bell above the door chimed, and Councilman Richard Green strode in, his presence immediately tensing the atmosphere. "I've heard rumors about historical artifacts being found in our town," he said, his tone sharp. "The items belong to our mother," Daniel stated firmly. Green's lips thinned. "Items of historical significance found within town limits fall under municipal jurisdiction. The town should have oversight." "These aren't just random artifacts," Eliza protested. "They're part of our family's legacy." "A legacy that could bring substantial revenue to Willow Ridge," Green countered. "The town council should be involved in any decisions." The tension carried into the town hall meeting the following evening. The room buzzed with whispers as Eliza and Daniel presented their vision for a non-profit cultural center. "This center would benefit everyone," Eliza explained. "It would provide educational opportunities and preserve important historical pieces." Councilman Green stood, his voice carrying across the room. "The costs of such a facility would burden our taxpayers. The town should maintain control to ensure proper management." Alice Mitchell rose from her seat. "The Harpers have always put this community first. Their mother protected these treasures for a reason." Murmurs of agreement and disagreement rippled through the crowd. Mayor Thompson called for order as the room divided into heated discussions. Eliza and Daniel exchanged worried glances, realizing their path forward would be more complicated than they'd imagined. In Attorney Michael Bennett's wood-paneled office, Eliza and Daniel sat across from their longtime friend and legal counsel. Sunlight filtered through the Venetian blinds, casting striped shadows across Bennett's concerned face as he reviewed their documents. "Your mother's documentation is meticulous," Bennett said, adjusting his reading glasses. "You have clear ownership rights to these artifacts. However," he paused, shuffling through some papers, "the town council can make this process extremely difficult." "But they're our family's legacy," Eliza protested, her voice tight with frustration. "Legally, yes," Bennett agreed. "But a court battle could take years and drain resources better spent on the cultural center itself." He leaned forward, folding his hands on the desk. "I strongly recommend mediation. It's faster, less expensive, and could prevent lasting damage to community relationships." Daniel rubbed his temples. "And if Green refuses to negotiate?" "Then we'll fight," Bennett said firmly, pulling out a fresh legal pad. "But let's try diplomacy first." Later that afternoon, in Councilman Green's Stark office, Eliza and Daniel faced the stern-faced politician across his imposing desk. His expression remained unmoved as they presented their proposal for collaboration. "The town's interests must be protected," Green insisted, his tone dismissive. "We can't simply—" The door opened, and Mayor Thompson strode in, carrying a thick folder. "I believe we need to discuss your real interests in this matter, Richard." Green's face paled slightly. "Margaret, this isn't the time." "I have documents here," Mayor Thompson continued, placing the folder on his desk, "showing your correspondence with commercial developers. Plans to turn these historical artifacts into tourist attractions for personal profit." The silence in the room grew heavy as Green stared at the folder, his jaw tightening. Finally, he cleared his throat. "Perhaps I've been overzealous in my concerns. The town would be better served by supporting the Harper's vision," Mayor Thompson said firmly. "Don't you agree?" Green's shoulders slumped slightly. "Yes, I suppose so." In Willow Ridge Town Square, the afternoon sun warmed the gathered crowd as Eliza and Daniel stood before their neighbors. The tension of recent weeks had dissolved into an atmosphere of excitement and possibility. "The Margaret Harper Cultural Center," Eliza announced, her voice carrying across the square, "will be a place where history comes alive, where our children can learn, and where our community can grow together." Alice Mitchell was the first to step forward, clipboard in hand. "I'm organizing volunteer committees," she called out. "Who's ready to help?" Hands shot up throughout the crowd as people gathered around, eager to contribute to the project. Mayor Thompson stood nearby, smiling as she watched the community unite around the Harper's vision. Months later, at the construction site of the Margaret Harper Cultural Center, the old chapel buzzed with activity. Workers carefully restored the historic architecture, while volunteers helped organize artifacts under Dr. Reynolds' watchful eye. "The children's section should go here," Sophia said, pointing to a sunny corner. "We could have hands-on history activities and storytelling sessions about Grandma Margaret's adventures," Lila added, her eyes bright with enthusiasm. Ben Thompson coordinated groups of volunteers, clipboard in hand. "Mrs. Mitchell's team is cataloging photographs, and the high school art club is designing educational displays," he reported to Eliza. Dr. Reynolds carefully examined each artifact, her expertise ensuring proper preservation. "These pieces tell an extraordinary story of courage and compassion," she remarked, handling a delicate manuscript. "Your mother's work saved countless cultural treasures." Later that evening, in the warmth of the Harper family home, Eliza and Daniel sat on the porch swing, sharing a quiet moment. "Remember how stubborn we both were?" Eliza asked softly. "All those years wasted being angry." Daniel nodded, his expression thoughtful. "But look at us now, working together, raising the girls, continuing Mom's legacy." "Thank you," Eliza whispered, "for taking care of my daughters when I couldn't, for giving me a second chance." "You came back," Daniel replied simply. "That's what matters. And now the girls have both of us, plus an incredible legacy to carry forward." The evening before the grand opening, the Harper family walked through the quiet halls of the cultural center. Display cases gleamed softly, holding carefully arranged artifacts. Interactive exhibits stood ready for eager visitors, and educational spaces awaited curious minds. "Your grandmother would travel for months," Eliza explained to the twins as they paused before a world map marked with Margaret's journeys. She believed that preserving culture meant preserving humanity itself. Daniel carefully placed the reunited necklace pieces in a central display case. The inscription beneath read, "Margaret Harper's Legacy, Unity Through Understanding." The family stood together, arms linked, in the heart of the building that represented not just their mother's work, but their own journey from brokenness to wholeness. The Margaret Harper Cultural Center gleamed in the morning sunlight, its restored facade adorned with festive ribbons and banners. Townspeople and visitors from neighboring communities filled the courtyard, their excited chatter creating a buzz of anticipation. Mayor Margaret Thompson stepped up to the podium, her voice carrying across the crowd. "Today, we honor not just the incredible legacy of Margaret Harper, but the power of family, forgiveness, and community spirit." Dr. Amelia Reynolds followed, gesturing to the building behind her. "Within these walls lies a testament to courage and cultural preservation. Each artifact tells a story of humanity's resilience and the importance of protecting our shared heritage." When Eliza and Daniel Harper took the stage together, a hush fell over the audience. 5 years ago, Eliza began, her voice thick with emotion, I wouldn't have believed this moment possible. Our journey from estrangement to reconciliation mirrors the very values our mother championed. Daniel squeezed his sister's shoulder. Through the discovery of our mother's legacy, we found not just artifacts but the true meaning of family. Sophia and Lila Harper, dressed in matching blue dresses, approached the ribbon with ceremonial scissors. The crowd erupted in cheers as the twins cut the ribbon together, officially opening the center's doors. As visitors flowed through the exhibits, an elderly woman with silver hair and kind eyes approached Eliza and Daniel. I'm Helena Rossi, she said softly. Your mother and I worked together for many years. Daniel's eyes widened. But we were told you had passed during the war. Helena smiled gently. That was necessary at the time. Your mother's work saved countless lives and irreplaceable treasures. She asked me to give you this when the time was right. She withdrew an envelope, weathered with age. Inside was a letter in Margaret Harper's familiar handwriting. Eliza's hands trembled as she unfolded it. The twins pressed close to their mother and uncle as Helena shared stories of Margaret's courage and compassion. Later that evening, the Harper family gathered in their living room. The fireplace cast a warm glow as they sat together on the sofa, Margaret's letter resting on Eliza's lap. Daniel began to read their mother's words aloud, her message of love, forgiveness, and hope washing over them like a gentle embrace. If you enjoyed the story of Daniel, Eliza, and the twins, I hand-picked this next story that will touch your heart. Please don't miss this one. Click here to watch it.